Welcome, everybody, to the Collateral Damage Podcast. Today, we're going to be talking with Theresa Harmon from To the Moon and Back, right? And I believe, Maureen, this is about Neonatal Abstinence Syndrome, one of the many forms of collateral damage that I'm imagining our listeners are not used to talking about or probably even thinking about. And more importantly, they probably don't understand completely. So Theresa is going to help us out with that. And so now, what's your understanding of the situation? This is something that you brought to the table as a real. I mean, and I had never really thought about it before today.
I think there's so many things that people don't think about, that we think about. You know what drives me crazy too? I mean, I'm a big person big on language, and
Right.
people talk about kids that are born addicted. Well, it's not possible
Mm.
to be born addicted. You could be born dependent upon a drug.
Mm-hmm.
The drug in utero could have had lots of effects. And so, I mean, that's what Teresa is all about, and helping families, whether they're adoptive families or foster families, and professionals learn about this neonatal abstinence syndrome and the effects that more than likely will have on a child for the rest of its life.
Right.
And I know from being a special education teacher, I know that there are lots of special education issues that we're going to be seeing in the next 10 years, 15 years, as
Well, it's
kids
like the
go through.
generational impact, right? Like this is.
Yes.
Oh,
So it's not just the trauma of whatever happens, losing a parent or being raised in a household where someone is dependent on drugs and going through that, but having been born into that and exposed in utero to drugs, very often create changes in the brain, and we're going to be seeing a lot of new and special education issues. That's what I was trying to think of. Yeah,
right.
and I think that that's just one thing. So I'm aware of that because I'm a teacher. So, and
Yeah.
there's just so many other health issues that are going to come up, and challenges with raising somebody that has been exposed in utero.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously don't. Like I said, I don't think about this all the time. I'm not sure our listeners are thinking about what's left behind. That there's this generation of grandmothers raising their grandchildren, and the children who are being born dependent on substances, and then the struggle that they go through, and the ongoing damage,
Right.
and how it affects them. So.
I'm telling you. So I'm excited to hear what Teresa has to say.
Me as well. Me as well. I can't wait to learn. I love learning from our guests on this podcast, and I'm really excited to have Theresa on. So, without further ado, Theresa Harmon. So, I understand, Maureen, we have a special guest today, Theresa Harmon, who is going to share about her organization, which is addressing a really unique side of this epidemic. We talk about the collateral damage. This is one of those ones that I'm not quite sure people really think about and understand the impact. She runs an organization, To the Moon and Back, as I said, addressing an issue that I'm just really I'm excited to talk about, and I think it's going to be interesting for people to hear this side of things. So I'd like to welcome her to our podcast. So how you doing, Theresa?
Hi, good. How are you guys?
Doing well. Thank you for joining us. So, would you mind sharing a little bit about To the Moon and Back, and what your motivation was to start this organization?
Yeah, so we are a nonprofit out of Plymouth, Massachusetts. We got our nonprofit status back in April, but even before that, we had started with support groups for caregivers. And the reason being was, as we saw a lot of unmet needs around children born with neonatal abstinence syndrome and other substance exposure.
Can I actually ask you to explain that real quick? So this neonatal abstinence syndrome this is so you're talking about children born with. Are they dependent? Are they addicted? How is it that they are identified?
Yep. So there's two sides to this. There's the NAS designation, and so that is the withdrawal syndrome that children go through when they're born. So they're born dependent, typically dependent on opiates.
Mm-hmm.
It can also include SSRIs, some other psychotropic medications, benzodiazepines, but typically we talk about it in relation to opiates.
Of course.
And then we also talk about SEN, which is substance exposed newborn. So those are kids that do not go through withdrawal but have had in utero exposure as well.
Okay.
Okay.
Wow. I guess that again, that's one of those topics that, not a lot of people think about, is that, the aftermath of an individual experiencing substance use disorder with a child, and then what happens afterward. And I guess that's where you've picked up, this organization has picked up.
I don't think I knew of any organizations that were addressing this before.
Yeah, I mean, to my knowledge, there's definitely some agencies that do a piece of this, but our focus is solely on the children that have been affected by this, and then their families, whatever that constellation may be.
And so this is, as to Maureen's point, I mean, there are not a lot of places addressing this as a whole. If I was looking at some of your services and the wraparound that you provide, from providing services to the actual child, to the family, to educating other caregivers, social workers, people who have direct interaction with these children and the family systems around them, right?
Correct. Yeah. Yep. And we've geared our services based on, from our support groups, what we hear from our families. We initially started with, here in Massachusetts, about 20 families back in 2017.
Mm-hmm.
We now serve about 65 families.
Wow.
And a lot of them have more than one child.
Okay.
So, and that was why we went around to get our nonprofit status, because the groups that we were, having for caregivers just wasn't enough for what these families needed.
So this is not being funded. This is something you're funding through your nonprofit. You're raising funds and you're getting support so that you can provide these services, correct?
Yeah. So we have a part-time grant writer who helps us, and then we do one major fundraising event per year to support the nonprofit.
That's great. When is that fundraiser?
So this year it's going to be September 27th.
That's my birthday.
Second year. What'd you say?
That's my birthday.
So it's fundraiser and
so it's fundraiser / Mike Wilson's birthday.
That's right.
Make sure you put that on the flyer.
Oh, you're gonna love what it is too. Theresa, talk about what it is that you do, because this sounds like so much fun.
So we're doing adult prom. This will be our second year.
Isn't that great?
That's awesome. So what does that mean? What do you do?
It's exactly what it sounds like. It's a prom for adults.
Okay.
So if you haven't been to your prom, if you want to relive your prom, if you want to ask the person you went to your prom with before, this is a great opportunity to relive all that.
That's great. Where is this held?
We have it at Alden Park in Plymouth.
Wow. Well, that's great.
Great?
That is great. That's amazing. Yeah. I love the idea. I love creative fundraising ideas. I think you can have so much fun, talking about and raising money for just a great cause, and people love to show up for fun stuff. Now, are you? Is this information will be available on your website as it comes closer, right? That's the
Yes,
tothemoonback.org, number 2themoonback.org.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that sounds like fun. And it's on my birthday. We'll see, maybe. I was reading an interesting fact here that you have on your site that says every 15 minutes a child is born with withdrawal symptoms from this.
That blew me away.
Study from the Vanderbilt University. This is 2018. This is a recent study. This is I'm assuming they've been studying this all along. Are the numbers up? Is that more significant than in previous years?
Yeah, so nationally, the number back in 2015 was one child every 25 minutes.
Wow.
So we're definitely seeing an increase, and we see that same increase here in Massachusetts.
Right. So I mean, that's a direct correlation to the the growing number of overdose deaths as well. I mean, just the fact that this is escalating year after year and that it's measurable is terrifying. It's terrifying.
So Theresa, we like everybody's seen the pictures of a child withdrawing, and I don't think there's anybody that hasn't, isn't somewhat aware of that. But what kind of services will a child need?
That's a really good question. So the research is not quite there yet, but what we see from, the children that we've worked with for some time now is that kids are more susceptible to vision and hearing issues. They tend to have fine and gross motor delays. They have issue with what they deem as behavior, but really is sensory processing problems. And then trouble around executive functioning, so things like figuring out where things go within space, like where their body belongs, having difficulty with transitions and flexible thinking and things like that.
So these are all increased special education issues that we're going to see in the next, increasing every year, actually.
We're seeing it now, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So these kids are now in elementary school, and based on the opiate crisis, they're roughly up to second grade now. Some of them are just entering kindergarten, but the majority are, at least from our cohort of children, kindergarten, first and second grade.
Wow.
And the schools are reporting that they're seeing, an increase in behavioral issues and an increase in the amount of IEPs that they're writing, and they think that it's related to this.
So I mean, we're really talking about the generational impact of this whole experience. I mean, this is going to play a role into their educational experience, their social interactions, right up into their adult years if something's not done about it, if the services aren't added to the equation, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and the kids are eligible for early intervention. They're eligible for 1 year automatically with an NAS diagnosis, which I don't know that, all families know.
But that's not enough.
Right.
By
And
any stretch
they're
of
not
imagination.
accessing those services. We recently got data that showed that kids with an NAS diagnosis aren't accessing early intervention until 2 years and 4 months on average in Massachusetts. So it only goes to 3 years. By then it's 80% past,
So what's
available for early intervention.
what's the initial process? I mean, you're talking about these children are born. So in the hospitals, are you taking it upon yourselves as a part of your organization to go into these hospitals, emergency rooms, to train these folks to be aware of it, to refer correctly? Is that, I mean, to educate the families that are going through this and make sure they get these services sooner?
The hospitals are making a very concerted effort to make sure that families get referred, and those numbers have begun to increase, which is great. I think something like 60% of families or eligible children were being referred, and now that number I think is up to about 80%.
Oh, that's
so
great.
That's really good. But then it's just a matter of sometimes even just getting the clinicians in the door to be able to serve these families.
Okay.
And then, to Maureen's point, even after early intervention, the issues that we're seeing are despite and beyond early intervention.
Absolutely.
So even with those services.
Yeah, these are not things that are going to go away. These are lifelong problems.
Wow. And so how long can you stay involved? How long can you stay involved? Just the 3 years? Is that what you're suggesting?
For early intervention, yeah, it's birth to 3 years.
Okay.
And that's a federally funded program that's available.
Okay. Wow. I guess I again, as I said right from the beginning, I never really even think about this. I mean, I know it exists, and I know that there was, the era of the crack baby, during the crack epidemic in the 90s, that people were talking about these children being born, dependent on the substance, and then there's even, some people that identify as they are part of the crack baby generation, and I can imagine that a statement like that, a name like that, or a phrase like that is terrible and stigmatizes just like it did back then. And I'm assuming that you're hearing very similar statements of babies born addicted to opiates and stuff like that just perpetuate that stigma. How do you guys battle that?
It's really upsetting because this, it personally hits home for me, and obviously for our families. But there was a recent article that we participated in that deemed our children opiate kids.
Oh, see, that's what I was talking about.
We had specifically asked them, because often the media calls them, babies or children born addicted, or they use the addiction terminology, and I asked them specifically to steer clear of that, and to say opiate dependent or substance dependent, and instead they coined a new phrase. So.
And I guess that's what I was talking about. I mean, people love a headline. People love a statement. Something that embodies it. And I guess I would imagine that that's what they're going to fall back on, unless we can change that language and change how we talk about it. That and so they're not born addicted. They're not born with the desire to use. They're not born with that same obsessive compulsive desire to keep using to prevent them from being sick. They're just born physically dependent against their will, and there's a process to help them get through that, correct?
Exactly.
Yeah. Opiate kids. I don't like that at all. I think that's terrible.
Yeah, it killed me.
Yeah.
And I think it's important too to know, despite these, these issues that we see with kids, with early services, with continued services, that these kids can do really, really well. With the sensory processing piece, their brains just function a little bit different. And if we make modifications to how we interact with them, they do really, really well.
I love that change.
And the earlier the better. I mean,
Yeah.
it brings the possibility of minimizing the effects of this if we can get. I say that because I'm a special education teacher, so I know I really understand how important that is.
Yeah, change the education around them. Don't expect the child to just conform because you want them to.
Well, and then the other piece is so you have kids going into the school that feel less than. They're opiate kids, and there's these expectations that they again are going to follow in their parents' footsteps. That's not what we want.
And now are you interacting with the parents that are struggling with this substance use disorder as well? Are you interacting at that level?
There's a Recovering Moms Helping Moms in Plymouth.
Wow.
And we do interact with them.
So this is one of the support groups that you guys provide?
We don't provide that group. It's a separate group, but
Okay.
but we are available to them. And we do a kids group that is open. So the only service that we have that is just for caregivers is our caregiver support group. The rest of our services are open to any family, regardless of constellation. So we do a kids group where, knowing some of these things that kids struggle with, we, teach them things through play, the kids and their families. So we've done like yoga and mindfulness. We are scheduled to do karate this weekend.
Wow.
We've done a sensory play group as well. And so the hope is to show families some things that they can use at home to help kids. And we invite anyone to come to that. We've invited the Recovering Moms support group as well. So.
Wow. That's great.
So, Theresa, there's lots of gaps in the system. I see them all the time. What do you think is the biggest gap right now as far as what's related to what you do?
There's so many gaps. It's just so much of it is that this is so new and just lack of education.
But is it new really? Because we've always experienced this. It's in the news now.
The influx of children, for sure.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different things. I think, like you said, this has existed for a while. These kids, again, are around 9 years old. So we've been dealing with this for a while.
What would you do if you could change one small thing to get us going on the right track? Is there anything that you can think of?
Yeah, the main thing I think would be coming up with a plan, best practices in care.
Just across the board, right?
Yeah, best practices in care across the board, getting kids, when we know that they've had this exposure, neuropsych eval, getting them an occupational therapy eval, knowing, what we know now. And then even earlier, making sure that they get early intervention if possible. And the services there to help with some of these issues of gross and fine motor. I think all of those things would be really, really useful for kids.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think maybe breaking down the stigma a little bit too, so that people aren't afraid to come in early when they're earlier in their pregnancies, if they knew that there was actual support and help afterwards.
Absolutely. It's been hard because a lot of money goes into prevention and to, helping upstream with parents with substance use disorder, and that's so important. But we can't forget these kids.
Well, it's like they're left behind, they're an afterthought almost.
Right. They're the innocent victims, and, they didn't ask for this. They didn't have a say in it, and we need to do better for them. We've, not done everything that we could for them at this point. So.
Man, that is sad to hear.
Thank you for stepping in. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, you have quite a family of people over there at your organization. I understand. I was just taking a peek at your roster there, your group of folks. You've got some
my lineup.
Your lineup, yeah, exactly. You've got a solid group of people. I imagine these are folks that share your same passion, right?
Yeah, we've got a great board. We've got a it's been changing. I believe we have a 10-member board of volunteers now. We have the director of social work from Beth Israel, who is wonderful. Myself, we have somebody who is really great with marketing. We have now our West Virginia chapter, so we have the board president from down there that's involved.
Yep.
And we got involved with them because they just really needed us. They have the highest rates of NAS in the country.
Wait, Virginia?
Yeah, West
Wow,
Virginia.
West Virginia. I didn't
Yeah,
realize
but
that.
just right behind, we're right behind them, right? Is that correct?
I'm actually not sure what number we are, but their rates are about 7% of births, whereas ours are about 2%.
Wow.
That's a high number. Yeah. So this conference that you have, this is open to everybody. You have a conference coming up, and this is for providers.
So it's for providers, but the reason why I really wanted to do this is because I've been, because I'm a social worker, I go to all these events, and a lot of them are geared towards the medical community. And so this information is getting to the medical community, but it wasn't trickling down to families that need it, to frontline providers such as early childhood educators or schools, pediatricians even, about best practices in care and how to help these kids. And, again, we're still at the very early stages of that, but there are some places that are really doing great work around this. So we really wanted to get this information to the people who really needed it. So it's open to families, it's open to providers. We have on-site daycare, so that hopefully that's not a barrier. We kept the price really low so that we could get families, especially our grandparents raising grandchildren that have, limited money because they're taking care of these kids. So we really wanted to make it accessible for as many people as possible.
That is, you just brought up an entire new generation of people right there. The grandparents raising grandkids. I mean, those support groups have been exploding. Those people have been just handed a whole new generation of kids a whole new life. I mean, that's a whole nother topic right there. Now, where is this conference being held?
It's going to be at the 1620 Hotel and Conference Center in Plymouth.
Oh, okay, right down in Plymouth. So you guys are primarily focused a lot of your stuff is coming right out of Plymouth, right?
Yeah, I wanted to keep it in my hometown just because it was special to me to be able to bring it to a really great community that already has a really great collaboration through places like PCO Hope. We're being sponsored by the Plymouth County DA's office, which is really wonderful, Tim Cruz. So it was really important to me to try to keep it in our community, but there's people coming from all across Massachusetts doing it.
Plymouth County is doing some amazing things. I'd love to actually have somebody on and talk about the program that they do in the, is it the middle schools?
Plymouth Youth Development Collaboration.
Yeah.
They're wonderful. One of our partners as well.
So Theresa, do you have any ideas for, where the future of your company is headed and what your mission or your goal is?
So we actually have some really exciting things coming up, especially May 1st. So definitely check back on our Facebook page and our website. We are going to be merging with another nonprofit and another collaboration, which we'll be announcing then and also at the conference.
Great.
Which I think will really enhance our services and our reach throughout Massachusetts.
That is fantastic.
That's exciting.
Yeah, it is. Sounds like you're heading in the right direction.
That's exciting.
Anything else you'd like to share with our listeners?
I think, the biggest thing when I talk about our children is just remembering them. Here in Massachusetts, we just don't talk about them enough. And, talking with you guys is helping to get that out there. But these kids are really important. We've already lost a generation that we should have done more for, and we have an opportunity moving forward to be creative and innovative in how we care for them. In Massachusetts, it's always been the first in being innovative. So why shouldn't we be here as well?
Man, what a powerful way to end this. That's like, I couldn't have said it better myself. Let's not forget these kids that are left behind. So much press and so much time gets spent on the individuals that are struggling with it, that we forget about the people that are left behind, which is, again, why Maureen and I want to have these conversations and have people like you on to talk about all the collateral damage that is being left behind. And I feel like these kids are definitely fitting right into that. So thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
It's so sad that we have to be talking about things like this, but I'm so glad that there are people like Theresa that are working on helping families deal with these issues.
I would agree with you. I mean, again, this is not the type of thing that I even want to think about, but I'm glad that somebody is addressing this, and that there's, it sounds like they're educating, the people across the board. They're educating the professionals, they're providing support for the families. And, I mean, how important is it for people to talk about this correctly? We brought in that whole, the back in the day when it was the crack baby. It's not a crack baby. It's a child that was born dependent on a substance against their will, because of an epidemic that was sweeping the nation. The same can be said now. These aren't heroin babies. These aren't opioid babies. These are babies that are born dependent on a substance. And like she was saying, how we talk about this matters. And, same to your point, it makes a difference. And having an advocate out there for a baby that can't advocate for themselves, speak up for them, make sure that they're getting the right education, make sure that the people who are working with them understand what's happening. I mean, I'm just super grateful that even exists, and never would have thought about it.
And I love how she's connecting people. So the symposium that do you recall the date?
May 10th.
May 10th.
Friday, May 10th from 8 to 4.
I mean, because that's so important, is connecting other people that are interested in the topic, that are, have a stake in the topic, whether they're a foster parent or a grandparent, and then the caregivers too, the providers. I mean, it's so important to get these people all in the same room and talking, because that's how we learn.
Absolutely. And they have all the information about this. I mean, what is it? It's To the Moon and Back, tothemoonandback.org with the number 2 is their website. Yeah. And I mean, a lot of what she was talking about, this conference that they're having, I believe they're doing a fundraiser that we talked about. It just happens to fit right on my birthday.
I know. I think it's a.
The prom.
Would you like to go to the prom? I didn't go to my prom. Did you go to a prom?
No, I didn't go.
No, I was far too cool for the prom, which was such a mistake.
I was cool in the sense that I was definitely doing the wrong thing.
Yes, I think that's what I meant.
But they, I mean, it seems like they're trying everything they can, and just a great organization to support. So
yes, I think that idea of an adult prom it sounds like so much fun. So that's September 27th, when everybody there will be celebrating your birthday.
Well, that was what I was just going to say, is that I just assume that anyone that's going to this event will keep me in mind and will be wishing me birthday wishes that day. So
I'm sure they will be. I have no doubt. With all that I do with Magnolia New Beginnings, it is all really about connection. So we have, and this is how I met Theresa. We have 1,200 people in the state of Massachusetts, 20,000 people across the country, in closed and open support groups. And when I say it's an open page that anybody can access with news and inspiration and support, but it's also, we also have these closed groups that people request to join, and they're on Facebook, and they're Magnolia Addiction Support, if you search for that. And anybody we have state groups, they're all on our magnolianewbeginnings.org website as well. And you can go on there, look for the support group in your particular state, or whether you're a grandparent raising a grandchild, you can join that group. Or you can just join the national group, which is just the Magnolia Addiction Support. And I think there's almost 3,000 people just in that group. Wow. It's so in the middle of the night.
It's such a great way to connect, right? I mean,
it really is.
Yeah.
It's like a 24-hour a day meeting, because there's always somebody on there.
Right.
And a lot of the people, they connect and get very close and take it offline too. So there's nothing like sitting next to somebody or being in the same room with them. It doesn't take the place of meetings, and it doesn't take the place of that. But it certainly is an incredible support and education. And we try to, when anything new is happening in an area, we share the news, we share different groups, support groups, activities. We have a recovery group, and I try really hard to make sure that we share anything interesting that's going on. we're also very careful that there's no marketers in there. There's nobody looking for business in there, and there's nobody selling anything. So we won't allow that. But if there's an event going on, and we'd love to post those, because anything that's fun and sober is definitely welcome in our recovery groups. So,
well, that part that you just mentioned is super critical. And I guess, for our listeners that are considering this, there's a lot of bad places on Facebook and on social media that you can get caught up with, what seems like a healthy support group, or what seems like people trying to help, but are in fact, ads or marketers, people that, work for a specific program or trying to lead people astray. Probably another podcast that we'll do in the not too distant future is, the industry that's been built on the backs of addiction and families and stuff like that. But, to your point, the fact that there are people regulating this and that it is a safe place is probably the most important thing for someone to know, is that, when you are scrolling around on your feed, when I feel an ache or an illness and I get on the internet and I'm searching for what that problem is, I can get lost if I don't look in the right place. And next thing you know, I feel like I have cancer, and it's because I got ahead of myself there. The same could be said with these Facebook groups. You can get lost if you're not in the right place. And
absolutely.
Magnolia New Beginnings and all the different supports they provide. There are people who are what do you call it when you have somebody in there that's kind of regulating everything? What do they call
administrators?
That?
We have 21 administrators across the country that watch these groups. So we're really careful about that. No one's allowed to sell anything. No one's allowed to ask for money of any kind. Yep. And if every once in a while somebody will slip in and they're out before they know it, we find them. So
Well, that's great. I mean, it's all about the safe place, and I'm just so grateful that even exists. So.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I just welcome anybody that needs some support, or needs an ear, or needs to know they're not alone to join.
And I mean, they can, through that medium, they can find resources directly too. It's not just a support group. They can find access to more direct services if they feel like they need it. So.
Yep, I always say it's like the Angie's List of addiction treatment. Don't piss off a mom. That's a dangerous thing to do. They'll let you know. You go in there and ask for advice, they will give it to you.
That's great. Well, it's a great resource, and part of the idea behind this is to start the conversation, but to make people aware of the resources that are available. So
yes.
I'm glad that one exists. And so to the same theme, of us talking about the collateral damage and the family system and everything that's happening, I understand we've got some pretty nice guests lined up. So for those of you that have been listening up to this point and just recently got to part 2 of Andrew Berkey, and now today with Theresa Harmon, we've got a couple other podcasts coming up within the next week or two that people are going to be really interested in. And we're going to keep this theme going of collateral damage, and getting to understand how this is affecting our lives, our families, and our communities. Just what's been done, what's happening, and what we can do about it. So, I'm really, as of right now, I'm very grateful for our listeners and the people who are helping us share this and subscribing to our podcast and subscribing to our YouTube channel. And we encourage you, if you're listening to this now, to find whichever way you can to help us get this information to other people. Sharing it on Facebook. The bottom of the screen here, we've got all the different ways you can share it scrolling. If you don't know what to do, you can always just go to cdpodcast.com, and on our website is every possible way to find and or share our podcast with other listeners. So if you can help us do that, we would be grateful.
And we're always open to people suggesting guests or asking questions. If we can help in any way, we will, and get those people on. If there's somebody that you have heard speak and think they'd be a good guest, let us know.
And they can do that through the website, right?
That's right.
Again, one of the many things you can do over at cdpodcast.com. All right. We can stop with that. I think we're done. We can throw the end. All right. I'd like to thank all of our listeners for joining us today on this episode of Collateral Damage. As always, if you'd like to find out all the different ways that you can listen to our podcast, you can visit our website, which is www.cdpodcast.com. There are many different ways to listen and subscribe, and we encourage you to choose the one that's most appropriate for you. And as always, I would encourage our listeners to get informed.
Stay connected.
Thank you for joining us.